Reaction there to the federal budget, which narrowly survived last night's confidence vote. There will be no snap election as a result for now, but the dynamics in the House of Commons are something to watch since the budget only passed because 4 MPs abstained. And of course, Liz May, the Green Party leader, voted with the government. Let's talk about that with our front bench here this evening. Former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, Dan Moulton. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Larissa Waller is the founder of Henley Strategies. She's a former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Kathleen Monk here in studio is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And Laura Stone rounds us out. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Hey. Happy day after election, or day after vote. I mean, no election, whatever you want to call it. Kathleen, I actually thought it was not futile in that I really emerged from that vote last night with a clearer picture of, in particular, where the opposition parties are. And they do not want an election. I think that's not just true of one opposition party. It's true of all of them.
It is true. And I would say on New Democrats' behalf, they actually came out and said that. We know that we do not want an election. We don't want to throw Canadians into elections, so we voted the way we did. On the other hand, you have the Conservatives, right, who have vowed at every opportunity to take down the government, have said they will oppose at every opportunity, said they will fight the government tooth and nail to take them down because they oppose the Carney government so much. And yet, when it comes down to brass tacks, what do? They hide behind the curtains. They literally hid behind the curtains last night.
Explain what you mean, just for people who were not glued like
I mean, there's so much comedic material in what's happening in the House of Commons right now that, you know, this hour for 22 minutes could have a whole season just based on the last few days. But no one would understand it because it's so procedural. But I'll tell you what happened was the Conservatives were unsure, really, of how the vote was going to play out. But they didn't want to trigger election either, but they weren't willing to say that. So the House leader, Andrew Scheer, and the caucus chair, Scott Reid, hid behind the curtains and decided to try to vote basically on the online app, which is allowed. You're allowed to do that. But basically, it allows also you to vote at the last minute to see how the other cards are, how everything's playing out, and then they still in the end had to scramble into the House because there were some glitches apparently with the technology. But the point is, this party, the Conservative Party, has said they would fight at every moment, and yet when it comes down, they fold like a cheap shirt. I mean, I agree. Listen, New Democrats are getting heat too. They're saying, hey, you know, why didn't you stand up, all 7 of you? All 7 of you, why didn't you stand up and all vote en masse? 5 did vote against the government, and 2 abstained because they didn't want to trigger the election. I mean, the same cannot be said for the Conservative caucus, where their leadership basically held out to the last minute. They had 2 abstentions. You've noted Genereux and Stubbs, and one for a medical issue. I wish Mrs. Stubbs, you know, the best, but I mean, come on, it's a joke.
Well, like what it does, Laura, is underscore what I said, right? Which is, it's obvious that both the NDP and the Conservatives, like the focus in the lead up to the budget had been on the NDP primarily, right? But like both don't want an election, I think.
Yes, I think I'm the only freak in the nation who did want one because I'm a political junkie and I love this stuff. But no, I'm just kidding. But no, look, I mean, let's just say what number one, it actually was suspenseful last night. I mean, I think 90%, we were 90% sure there wasn't going to be an election, but no one knew for sure, right? Because the parties hadn't formally declared in the way that they normally do in the lead up to these votes how things were going to shake out. There was an air of mystery. There was a twist with Elizabeth May saying midday she was going to support the budget, but no one knew for sure. And so I think there was certainly uncertainty heading into that. But you're absolutely right. I think both the Conservatives and the NDP knew that this is not the right time for an election for their parties. The NDP are in the midst of a leadership race. The Conservatives are still kind of finding their footing with the return of Pierre Poilievre to the House of Commons. They have some work to do there. He's facing a leadership review in January as well. Look, I mean, the Liberals had been kind of cataloging this, I think, for a few weeks of trying to blame the opposition for wanting one. I think the Liberals and certainly the Bloc may have been the only party that would have accepted it. But I think the electorate, the public, certainly didn't want this. They weren't interested in heading back to the polls this year. And I think everyone's just kind of ready to move on now with the business of governing after last night's drama and suspense.
What position do you think this leaves the Liberals in, Larissa? Because I'm not saying this will apply to every confidence vote, but ultimately, like, you know, to be fair to them, they presented a budget, they made no concessions to the opposition, and the opposition essentially allowed for that budget to pass.
Yeah, they were banking on the fact that nobody wants an election. We talked about this on the radio earlier, Vashi. This wasn't a vote in the confidence of the budget. This was a vote on, do you want an election? The Liberals don't want one either, neither does the Bloc. But who could actually go and fight an election is a different question. The Conservatives can. They have the money. They have the organization. So do the Liberals. The Bloc could figure it out. The NDP cannot. And so, you know, I give you some grace here that Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid were probably playing it safe. But at the end of the day, I think that they were right in their calculation that it was the NDP that really couldn't afford an election. It's going to be interesting to see how these future confidence votes go because the margins are so thin. I mean, there's about 4 people, right? So when there's a bigger opposition or a smaller opposition and you have a few more seats to play with, you kind of know how it's going to go. But I heard another pundit say this a few weeks ago, that human error will play so much into whether or not votes pass. Like, did somebody show up when they were supposed to show up? Did the app log on? And when we have 1 or 2 seats that we're playing with here, human error can really screw things up for every party here.
You could even see that, though, in as Kathleen described it, Dan, the fact that Mr. Scheer and Mr. Reid waited, right? Like, they were not fully confident because of the change in Elizabeth May's vote that the NDP would do what had been communicated, I think, earlier in the day they would do, right? So, like, everyone was hedging, which certainly leaves you with the impression that that kind of drama is not, you know, it could unfold again.
For sure. And look, let's stay in the weeds of this drama for a minute. I think it was a miscalculation on the part of the Conservatives to not show some resolve and strength in this position that they wanted to vote against the budget and trigger an election. They either want one or they don't want one. And in a moment like that, when all the eyes are fixed on you because there is this dramatic event in which, you know, something could go wrong, an election could get triggered, you kind of have to be resolved. You have to be strong in that position. And I think they really failed that test last night. The reality, though, is, just to zoom out here a little bit, you know, I think most Canadians would have seen last night and today, as they would have seen the news, the budget passed, right? The budget has passed this first test. It's moving forward. The Liberals have brought forward a plan to fund the agenda that they put forward before Canadians last spring, one that Canadians overwhelmingly endorsed, and believe is the right plan for this moment, a moment of great economic anxiety where we need to do and build big things as a country. And so that plan was brought forward. The Liberals look in this moment like they're the only ones with a credible plan to govern. And now it has the support of parliamentarians at this important juncture. And it looks like it will continue to have that support. And so I think, you know, we can get into the weeds of the drama of that moment and whether or not Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid were standing behind curtains or not. But I think the reality is most Canadians who aren't following this day to day are seeing the Liberals as the only ones with a credible plan to get the job done in this moment.